Let's just say for the purpose of this, it's a sport. Luke Littler, greatest 17-year-old sports person of all time. There we go.
And then to the point that Robbie Fowler was like, you know what? That Dave Windsor is a prick.
I'd see it as a badge of honour, man.
About.
If Robbie Fowler says Dave Windsor's a prick, then yeah, I'd take that.
Yeah, it's the dad who doesn't use the instructions because he's a bloke. So I'm gonna. I know how to put this IKEA furniture together. Yeah. I know how to do this.
Hello and welcome along to Not Another Sports Pod, episode number 28 with myself, David, and of course, well, I barely need to introduce you, Ollie. Now we've gone viral on YouTube. I think people know who we are by now. It's it's hard to deal with the fame. Mr. Oliver Wilson alongside me today as ever. Ollie, so much to get through this week. Title race, Liverpool and Arsenal both dropping points. Ruben Amorim's Man United pinching a point at Anfield. There's golf. There's any other business. There's lots of American sport. Lots and lots to talk about. But how are you, mate? I can sense there's a croakiness in your voice. What's going on, Wilson?
Yeah, not for the usual reasons of Wilson's been on the booze all weekend or anything like that, as it has been in the past. No, this is the... during Christmas, obviously it's a busy time for us and you try and do as much as you can and all that. And this is literally the first week where I've got a bit of like downtime before next weekend. And it's a good time to like, the body's kind of gone, right, we've got through the busy bit. Let the virus win. It's just, last couple of days have been knocked around the head a little bit with the little C, little cold. But yeah, it's all good, man. The sport gets you through it at the end of the day. I mean,
sport will just always be there. It will always this security blanket. It's just always on telly. It's just always there. I don't know.
I enjoyed so much starting my weekend with a text message from David Windsor saying, "Darts is just box office." What an unexpected Friday night turn of events to get. I wasn't even watching it. I had like my eye on it on the BBC tracker kind of thing. I was watching something with the missus. And for David Windsor to turn around and say darts is box office, which was really weird because there have been more exciting moments in the darts for sure this year than what was the eventual blowout in the final for Luke Littler's first ever World Championship victory. But I love the fact that even though it was a blowout, I could just see you sat there with like the iPad plugged into the TV or something, hands on the knees, edge of the seat, just watching history and drama unfurl.
Intoxicating telly, Ollie. Absolutely hypnotic, brilliant television. Let's just park the debate because we had it on another podcast about whether darts is a sport. I'm not totally sure it is. But if we
it's not a sport, but I love it. Yeah.
Let's just say for the purpose of this, it's a sport. Luke Littler, greatest 17-year-old sports person of all time. There we go. I think, I just want to say one thing on the darts, by the way, because I haven't watched any of it, but I watched the final, and I did the exact same last year. Didn't watch any of it, and then watched the final. And you can see why it's one of the fastest growing sports in terms of a TV audience. Because it is every frame, every set, every throw of the dart has its own like little narrative, its own drama. And you throw in that like boozed up crowd, like great broadcasting, a good commentator, and then the narrative of this 17-year-old superstar. And it's got all the ingredients to be great. And at Christmas only, on Boxing Day, we do this big family thing with extended cousins that I only really see once a year, right? And I love them all. And one of my cousins said on Boxing Day, a girl who I don't think she watches any sport at all. Like, I've never had a conversation with her about sport in all these years. Pretty sure she's got no interest in sport. She said to me, like, have you been watching the darts? And I was like, oh, no, I usually sort of pick it up in the final. She's like, I've been loving the darts. Absolutely love the darts. And I couldn't believe it. And I think we take it for granted sometimes because we're so into sport. But sometimes the ability of a sport to transcend its sport and just hook in random members of the public is amazing. And the fact that this, 30-year-old girl who has no interest in sport is just like a diehard Luke Littler fan and couldn't wait for the final. I just thought that was amazing. And it's such good telly. Like, it's such good telly.
Sarah's suddenly there. Last year she was very prim and proper, and this year she's got a pint of crappy warm Carlsberg and a pack of Rothmans tucked into her top pocket or something like that. Suddenly, you've been watching the darts, yeah? We're going to do it. I mean, I have to say, as a spectacle, at that time of year, we have so many sporting traditions in this country: Boxing Day football, New Year's Day football, which was basically it was a crime this year. The fact there was one Premier League game on New Year's Day, and that doesn't sit right at all. But having the darts throughout that whole festive period, because it's such a sport that could go off the rails with the fandom, but there's very few drunk aggro at the darts. There's rowdiness, but it doesn't tend to get aggressive or nasty as I've seen happen at things like the horse racing at Ascot and places like that, where you wouldn't expect it, and people are in their top and tails and they're all too boozed up and they're suddenly swinging at each other. And I think that festive spirit, along with just everyone's there to just have fun. It's a bit like Christmas Eve for 2 weeks. I think that's what it is. It's that Christmas Eve atmosphere down the pub for 2 weeks. We don't need to force it. Everyone's just there for a good time, so it doesn't matter. And I think that's what I really enjoy about it as a spectacle. And then, we've had some great narratives running through. We had the first female player making it out of the first round a couple of years ago, Sherry. And then we've also had, there are people that... There are very few darts players that will transcend the sport and get into the kind of common lexicon. Like Phil the Power Taylor, Van Gerwen's one of them, and now, of course, after the last 12 months, Luke Littler. There hasn't been somebody that I've seen that doesn't know who Luke the Nuke is. And that says a lot, particularly at this point of the year when there is so much other sport kind of going around.
So let's talk, Ollie. Who is the greatest 17-year-old sports star of all time? Because I personally think there's two names that are above everyone else. First of all, you have to start with Pelé. Pelé was 17 years old when Brazil won the World Cup in 1958, scored in the final. And by the way, it's worth going on YouTube to look at this goal because it's kind of similar to Gascoigne against Scotland. He clips it over the defender and then scored. It's a lovely goal and he's 17 years of age. So Pelé, you would say, the greatest 17-year-old for achieving what he did at the apex of the sport in a World Cup final at 17. But 1958 was a long time ago, Mr. Wilson. And you could argue that possibly the professionalism of the sport wasn't quite there and this and that. And, when you look at Luke Littler, I mean, he's got to be close. He's 17 years of age. He is undeniably the absolute star of darts. To win in the way he did, to be in a social media generation, as you say, when his name just ripples through social media and beyond sport, he's going to make a strong case for it. Let me throw some other names up there just to put into the melting pot that we can discuss, okay? Boris Becker won Wimbledon at 17. Serena Williams won the US Open at 17. The reason I'd say neither of those two is because when they won those slam events, it was kind of like a one-off. Neither were world number one at the time. Then you've got a LeBron or a Wayne Gretzky who were coming through at 17, but they weren't at the top. They weren't at the peak at 17. Then, Ollie's shaking his head. I'll let you come in a moment, Ollie. Then you've got names and I think this is a really strong case. Ronnie O'Sullivan won the UK Championship at 17, but didn't win the world. So again, I'd say that's he can't be there because it's too domestic. Then you look at Sachin Tendulkar scored 100 against England at 17, but again, wasn't at the absolute top of his sport. One name that I think it should be there that's definitely forgotten is Martina Hingis, the Swiss tennis star, who Ollie and I will remember very much kind of part of our youth. We were sort of teenagers as she was a teenager. I guess she must be around the same age.
I remember where I was when she won Wimbledon. Yeah, I remember
and she
exactly
was world number one at 17, and she actually won a slam, I think, at 16, and then won 3 slams when she was 17. So when you compare her to other tennis stars like Boris Becker and Serena Williams at 17, she was above those. So I think when you talk about the greatest 17-year-old sports star of all time, I think it's a straight shootout between Pelé, Littler, and Martina Hingis. I'd love to get all three. Well, obviously Pelé sadly passed away, but it would have been nice to get all three in a room, maybe having a bash at each respective person's sport. But there we go. What do you reckon, Ollie? Greatest 17-year-old sports star of all time?
Yeah, Gretzky goes into that category because when he was 17, he turned professional, came into the league, and that 17, 18 kind of point, he ended up being MVP in his first year in the league. So that was Gretzky was considered potentially the best player in hockey when he was 17 and then proved it going into 17, 18. And then obviously that carried on for the rest of his career, funnily enough. Another one, Michael Phelps, qualified for the Summer Olympics at 15. Now, he doesn't get an opportunity to compete in Olympics for another 4 years. So that puts him into the 19-year-old bracket, which is when, obviously, at Athens 2004, he made his mark and was
So not 17.
gold medals left, right. But at 17, was the greatest swimmer on the planet at that point. It's just the rotation of Olympic cycles meant that he couldn't compete in that. So I would say that Michael Phelps will go into that category of some of the best sports stars when they were 17. LeBron, I wouldn't say. Mike Tyson was 18, 19 when he really popped off, but as a 17-year-old, it was there. So I think that's one that you could throw into it. But again, I think the difference is, right, and I was thinking about this debate in general, there are a lot of sports where you can't be the best at 17. It's physically impossible. Tennis is one because you at least still have the speed to get across the court. Particularly with the ladies, obviously women mature earlier and go through puberty before men, so they are at not necessarily the very peak of their powers at 17, but they're getting there. Whereas some of the more physical sports, for instance, like boxing, it'd be very difficult for a 17-year-old boxer to reach the heights in, say, a heavyweight division and grab themselves a world title by that time because they are just not physically developed enough yet, which is why I then go back to the Gretzky argument at being 17, 18 and putting himself on top of the world in a physically demanding sport. And that is where then Luke Littler, I think, gets beaten by Pele to some extent. Football wasn't as physical as it was now, but the game was the game at that time, and Pele achieved the very top of that. Whereas, in theory, with darts, you could be 15, 14 and be as good as Luke Littler if you'd been at an hockey since you're about
saying there's
7.
no strength. There's no strength element behind it, right? So you could be 15 or 35, doesn't make a difference.
In the way we've said that darts players are sports stars as opposed to athletes, and that's a big clarification that needs to be made. Of Luke Littler, I'd never say is a top athlete because that implies physical prowess, fitness, in the ability to endure. Whereas, and there is an element of stamina to some extent in darts, obviously, having up there the mental focus, which is why I consider him a great sportsman. But as an athlete, I think you then...
You're being very kind there, Ollie, sort of reading between the lines. If you've seen a picture or watched Luke Littler, then yeah, he's not...
I mean, I'm thinking more about the old school darts guys as well, when there's they're sharing cigarettes up at the Oki about 30 years ago and stuff like that.
I think also, Ollie, something that popped into my head on Friday night when I was watching the darts is that it's uncomfortable to acknowledge this, but that's what peak performance can look like. As in, like a tubby 17-year-old doing what he did. That is sometimes just what peak performance looks like. And these days, everyone wants to do ice baths and eat their fruit and vegetables and, longevity and call your parents and put money into your pension. And you should do all those things because they're sensible things to do. But just be aware that, a chubby 17-year-old can rock out of bed and has more talent and genius on the tip of his finger than you will ever have doing everything correct for decades. And it's just like a humbling realization that you can chase like optimal, but ultimately genius will always trump whatever you're trying to do. So I just watching him, I was like, wow, that is the absolute summit of something. And Luke Littler, I mean, what's he having? Do you know what I mean? Like he's not worrying about any of these things. He's just waking up, just hitting double 10 for 8 hours, then going back to bed. I don't know. It's just an obscene. He also, I read an interview, Ollie, where he said some days he only trains 20 or 30 minutes a day. And that's got to sting for people. He's just a genius.
Well, that's the thing. I think it's more when you're passionate about something, that's always the thing you should follow because you're more likely to get great at something you care about than you are at something that, is whatever. I mean, that's what sets the great sports stars apart, is that they love it. I always found it weird when you had some footballers that would say, well, I don't really like football, I don't watch it, I'm just good at it. And to me, that screams of, you're going to get to a point where your physical ability will get you somewhere, but it's not going to take you to the upper echelons of exactly where you want to go. Whereas Luke Littler, from the sounds of it and everything that's been read and said about him over the last 12 months, because he has been on the scene now for the last 12 months in terms of not just in the darts world, but even bigger than that. It's been, he's always loved playing darts. And why wouldn't you? It's great to be down the pub. It's a great social thing to do. And if you love it and you can get good at it, it's a great talent to have. And he's just taken it to the next level. Nothing but respect and admiration for what he's done. It's an unreal achievement to have reached the the very top at 17. The only thing is that I heard that he's I can't remember who his idol was growing up, but I've heard that apparently the guy who is Luke Littler's idol in the darts world has been trying to like be a bit pally with him and be like, oh, Luke, congratulations. Oh, well done. Keep going. And Littler has ignored him for whatever reason, including apparently Littler is on his phone all the time. He's addicted to his phone like we all are, but like in a really bad way. And apparently this guy has been sending Littler text messages that Littler hasn't replied to. And this is meant to be the person that is like his idol growing up. And apparently his idol has kind of gone, fuck him. It's like really pissed off. I mean, it's one thing like never meet your idols, but it's another to have your idol then be rejected by you.
But you're 17, just like, do you know what I mean? You can ghost whoever you want.
But if Cantona, say, I don't know who your idol was. Who was your sports idol growing up, Dave?
I probably fell in love with football watching Robbie Fowler score goals for Liverpool.
So if Robbie Fowler started messaging you saying, oh, nice commentary, mate, really enjoyed that, hope we can work together one day on it or something, and you blanked him, and then to the point that Robbie Fowler was like, you know what, that Dave Windsor is a prick.
I'd see it as a badge of honour, man. If Robbie Fowler says Dave Windsor's a prick, then yeah, I'd take that. I'd take that on the chin. A couple of other things on this, Ollie. First of all, 500 grand British pounds prize money. But what price can you put on being a near household name in the UK? In terms of, I mean, what are We Buy Any Car or Huel or like, I mean, what are they going to pay this guy? I mean, because once you are a household name, there's not that many people. Do you not think it's a household name?
Yeah, man. Do you think Huel will be the ones doing it?
Well, mate, if Huel sponsored Littler and gave him like a personal trainer 5 times a week, and we're going to transform your body, and we're going to claim that it's the chocolate milkshake we're giving you, then I don't know. There could be something there. I think but I mean, he's going to make millions and millions and millions and millions. There's no price. You can't put a price on being a household name like that.
Well, he came second last year, wasn't it? And he got 200,000, and he said like, I don't know, I didn't know what to spend that on. I've still got a load of it, kind of thing. And now he's just doubled that. The thing with Littler though is he's got to be careful, because if he does something like that, for instance, let's talk about this Huel idea of some company being like, look, we're going to turn you into beach body ready Littler. Remember what happened with Phil the Power Taylor? He was a really big guy. He was at the top of the darts world, and then he started losing weight. And it changed his darts. He went off the boil because he was so used to the weight in his throwing arm and knowing how much propulsion to put in. And it is fine margins in darts, as we know. And that's the admirable thing about the sport, is that, you know, the slightest thing can take you out of a double 10, either into single 10 or whatever. And that could be the end of the leg, the end of the set, the end of the match. So don't go changing too much, Luke Littler. Not just because I want to see, you know, it's great having like a chubby beer drinking sports star that everybody loves, but it's even you need to be careful about how much you change in terms of keeping those darts. Very interesting, Ollie. So do you think that potentially the play would be for a sports scientist or nutritionist to say, right, whatever you weigh, 100 kilograms or whatever, we're gonna transform that fat into muscle, but we're gonna keep you throughout the entire process at 100 kg. So there's no bulk, there's no cut. We're just gonna transform that. Just thinking from that kind of point of view, that could be the play to make sure that there's no differential in terms of his weight. So his weight always stays exactly the same over these next 2 years of the Huel sponsorship. But if you build the muscle, that makes you naturally stronger, which means you need to put less effort into throwing the dart anyway. That will change because your muscle will be able to do more in theory with more strength behind it without you even realizing. So yeah, so maybe a more calibrated brand partner would be, you know, Mackey's or something like that. That would make more sense, wouldn't it? You know. Stella. And by the way, this isn't slagging off Little. I think the guy's a genius and he's 17. He can eat whatever the fuck he wants. Like it doesn't matter to me. I think he's there's plenty of time to get in shape after you've won 10 world championships or whatever. But yeah, incredible. Where do you stop? If you're Luke Littler, you're on the top of the world right now. You're 17 years old. And one thing for athletes is when you achieve something, and we've spoken about this on the podcast, when you achieve something that you really wanted to do, and then there's this like, wow, I've kind of done that. And obviously in sport, there's the idea if you can go and do back-to-back, repeat, become the greatest ever of all time. But you could, in theory, if Littler continues the level of dominance that he showed, particularly against Van Gerwen in the final, I mean, it was a whitewash. He was 4 sets up. Van Gerwen was off, wasn't he? Yeah, he was. I don't know what rattled him. It's very rare for someone like him to get rattled, but he was just slow out the blocks. But if you're Luke Littler, if you won 10 in a row or something crazy like that, and you became, sports personality of the year, all of that stuff, like you're just
Luke
the
Littler,
greatest. I mean, the greatest darts player of all time, Sir Luke Littler. That would be more deserving than Gareth Southgate, that's for sure. But where do you stop? Where do you keep the motivation?
Yeah, great question. I think I could see him going down without knowing too much about his personality. And Ronnie O'Sullivan's obviously a different character and a complex soul. And Luke Littler seems to me a bit more meat and potatoes kind of man, right? Straight down the middle. But I wonder if he just starts like taking the mick, as in, when you hit 2 treble 20s and there's not enough space to go for the 180, so they go down to treble 19. I wonder if he's just up there in a semi-final, he's just trying to hit that 180, and there's a few things like that just kind of creep in. But yeah, I mean, keeping at the very top. I mean, he's never going to touch. Phil the Power Taylor got 16 World Championships, I think. But that was at a time where there wasn't as much competition. It wasn't as professional as it is now. So I think that's very difficult for him to hit, even if he's at the top for the next 20, 30 years. So it'd be interesting to see where he keeps his motivation. I mean, I'm sure the cash will keep him going. Someone offers him a rolling contract of $1 million a year to stay in the top, 2 or whatever.
It's not that much, is it? When you think about the amount of money flying around sports. 500,000 for winning the World Championship.
Not true, but I mean, that's one event for a start. So, you double that with other events throughout the year. And as I say, I mean, so much money now across all sport is in the marketing. I mean, look at like Emma Raducanu's money from tournaments compared to her money from branding. And she's not the only one, by the way. There's loads of female tennis players that have the same, and some male tennis players as well have the same.
Athletes in general, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Rory McIlroy last year made more off the fund that they give out for basically social media interaction than he did for playing golf.
Wow.
The PGA have a fund that if you create the most headlines, social media interaction, draw more attention to the game of golf, there is a sliding scale for like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And Rory made something like 13 million, and even think he made 12.5 that year in golf tournaments. And it's like,
game's gone.
We're literally paying for attention.
All right, yeah. So that's the dart. Should we talk football, Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, let's talk Liverpool, Manchester United, and the shreds of hope that have been flung out towards Manchester United fans, and the weekend that I think has been a pretty negative one. If you're a Liverpool fan right now, you've seen Mo Salah have an exclusive interview with Sky and say, I want to finish my final year with Liverpool with a title, with this amazing Premier League title, which means Salah's going. It doesn't look like the contract is coming.
Disagree, but let's chat.
The two sides can't come together. I'm 100% think it could be smoke and mirrors, but it's definitely not a great line to have coming out because Salah basically said everything but I'm leaving. You then draw to Manchester United that haven't been able to buy a win, let alone defend a corner for the last 7 games. All this pressure on Amorim. And I, again, think it's a bit of a false dawn for Manchester United. And here's why. Very much appreciate defensively far more solid, far more structured, far more organised. There's also a consistent pattern of play for going forward in that game. Lessons have been learned. Things like the Casemiro-Eriksen combination in the middle of the field can't happen. Amorim's realised that after the Newcastle game. However, Manchester United are playing like a side fighting in a relegation battle. And what I mean by that is sides down at the bottom tend to raise their game when they take on big opponents at the top of the league, right? That's why you can see a struggling Everton suddenly be holding off, say, a Liverpool or a Manchester City or something like that, because they raise their game when they go to an Etihad or when the big boys come in. But they struggle then against the sides around them and in that middle echelon of the table because there's not that same peak high if we're taking on one of the big boys. And at the moment, Manchester United feel like a club that are able to raise their game against big sides and then don't have the mental fortitude. Now, that could change under Amorim. I hope it does. I wish him all the best at Manchester United in terms of I'd quite like to see just that club turn around a little bit from the dumpster fire that it is. But I think there's a really poor naivety of United fans to get too excited by a 2-2 draw at Anfield that was impressive and hard work for, but also it's very easy to, as I say, players to raise themselves, particularly going on the road to an Anfield, something like that. There's still a little bit of the Manchester United-Liverpool rivalry, although those days of proper football rivalries are pretty much dead in the Premier League to me. And I wouldn't be too smug as a United fan this Monday, personally.
Let's start with Manchester United then. I thought it was very interesting after the game that Ruben Amorim saw it as an opportunity to basically slag off his players, because he said he was really upset after seeing what he saw at Anfield, because I think it just doubles down on the idea, and what he was trying to say but not saying is that my players are really lazy and can only be bothered in the final few minutes of a Manchester derby or away at Anfield when you're trying to stop Liverpool at a title charge. And he said, he was essentially saying in that interview after by saying, I'm really upset with what I saw today. He was essentially saying, my players can't be bothered in most of the games, but they can be bothered in these games. And that's a big, big fucking problem. I agree with you about a false dawn. I mean, they started the weekend 7 points off the drop zone. They end the weekend 7 points off the drop zone. They got Arsenal in the FA Cup next. And then, as I mentioned last week on Not Another Sports Pod, I think the home game against Southampton on the 16th of January is just so big. They have to win that game. So I think there's that. I think they're not going to get relegated because there's enough in that squad not to be relegated. But look, I mean, they lost four and drawn one of the last 5 games. You know, they're in absolutely appalling form. Doesn't change the size of Amorim's task. And yeah, they got big problems, Manchester United, and a point at Anfield's not going to change this. I mean, as I say, they beat Manchester City the other day, a few weeks back, and then went on to have an absolutely awful run. So the big test for me, I think they'll lose against Arsenal in the FA Cup next weekend. That game against Southampton is still massive, and Amorim's got a big old job to do. And I think, said this before, but I think when he was asked to become Manchester United manager, he said, and he's been open about this, he said, no, I want to do it. I want to take the job in the summer. And Manchester United said, now or never. And he blinked first. And I think that was a big mistake. But who knows? Maybe he will turn it round, Ruben Amorim. As for Liverpool, Ollie, Mo Salah, I just think he's the worst negotiator ever, because he's just so desperate for the club to give him this contract. And he's sort of, he never does interviews. Like, it was so rare outside official outlets, and now he's just so chatty. This is my last year in the club. This is my last year. He's so chatty. And if he was going to leave, Ollie, if PSG or Real Madrid or someone like this had given him a great contract offer, you just wouldn't say anything. You just shut up, knowing you were going to Real Madrid in the summer. I mean, Real Madrid aren't signing Mo Salah, but you take what I mean, or Saudi or wherever he wanted to go. You just shut up, play the last 6 months, and leave in the summer. You wouldn't be, desperately baiting Liverpool and trying to hold the frame and hold the narrative and keep the fans on side. I will say this about Mo Salah, and it's similar with Trent. I think Mo Salah's in a little bit of danger of the fans at some point just being like, okay, fine, just leave them. Because this idea that Liverpool are sat there not offering him anything is just nonsense. Do you think they're offering him 10 grand a week and hoping he signs? They obviously have offered him, or have said to him in principle, they've offered him an obscene 2-year contract, which would be something like £350,000, £400,000 a week. Mo Salah's not getting screwed here. The offer on the table is a 2-year deal, but Mo Salah wants more. And Liverpool's American owners have got a philosophy, which is you don't offer players over 30 more than 2 years. It's set in stone. It's watertight. And it's a big old contract he's been offered, Ollie. So, I mean, I know he says he hasn't been offered a contract, but you know what I mean. With these negotiations, you're obviously testing the water and saying, what do you think about this, etc. So I think Mo Salah's the worst negotiator ever, because I think there's just no cool, there's no chill. Just shut up, Mo, and just see what the club come back with. Keep scoring your goals, and then in the summer you'll be out of contract, and if you scored 40 goals across all competitions, you'll be in a ridiculously good position. So yeah, that's it with Mo Salah. I think with Trent Alexander-Arnold, I mean, he was appalling yesterday, Ollie. And I think I'm not a big fan of Roy Keane. I mean, Roy Keane said in the post-match yesterday, oh, Real Madrid, how about Tranmere Rovers? And I know that goes viral, and I get it, and Roy Keane's got a job to do at Sky, but I do feel like some of the criticism of Trent is overly harsh at times, because fullbacks get skinned. They've always got skinned. Them and goalkeepers are the players that tend to be highlighted the most. But he was bad yesterday, Trent Alexander-Arnold. Real bad. And maybe it's a bad day at the office. Maybe the rain's lashing down at Anfield and Man United target that side. Mo Salah doesn't track back, by the way. So you are like left kind of exposed if you're on that right flank. All those things could be true. But it's not great when Real Madrid are putting a bid in January for you. I think he's gone. I think he wants to go to Real Madrid. Just come out and say it now for me with Trent. Say, look, I've been at the club for 20 years. You've given 20 years of loyalty to a football club. And you've won everything, regardless of what happens this season. You've won everything. And just say, I'm going to Real Madrid in the summer. And people will talk about it for, a week? And then it's just done, isn't it? I don't think then it gets spoken about much. So that's my...
I think it's...
Yeah, go on.
I think it's harsh on Trent Alexander-Arnold. The reception he's getting from Liverpool fans still of this, we made you, you need to stick around with us.
I'm not... Is that how you see it? Do you think that's what Liverpool fans are saying?
Well, I've definitely heard it, for sure, from Liverpool fans. I mean, there have been numerous quotes across plenty of football phone-ins of he should stick around, this club made him, brought him through, he should be sticking with us. And I just don't... Firstly, the naivety, again, of football fans to think that like that loyalty is there in this sport anymore. Just no. But also, what hasn't he done for you as a player at this point? Like, what more does he have to give back in terms of, like, great, thank you so much for bringing me through. Like, you've given me the greatest start to a career that a right back has probably had at Liverpool Football Club. And now I want to test the waters with somewhere new and try my hand at one of the other greatest sides in European football. I don't see that attitude. And it's a problem I have with Liverpool in particular, because there is this like loyal fan base that is very much like, it's the club, which I love. I think that's a superb attitude to have. It should be about the club rather than the individuals. But at the same time, you have to understand that an individual like Trent Alexander-Arnold has done everything that you've required of him. He's taken you to heights once again in English and European football that Liverpool fans 15 years ago could only dream of. He's been a key part of that operation, along with the Van Dijks, the Salahs, etc. And just let him go out with a bit of grace, because I think the reason he's probably staying quiet is because there is that like murmur of, oh, you're letting us down, we brought you through, and now you're turning your back on us. And it's almost like flack you don't need for the second half of the season, whether it's a week, a month, an hour, whatever.
I want to share with you all, probably the biggest Liverpool fan I know. I lived in Liverpool for years as a student, and a very good friend of mine is a massive Liverpool fan, lives in Australia now, but still flies back for finals and stuff, incredibly. Family season ticket holders, through 2-3 generations. And I asked him a few weeks ago, I said, if Virgil van Dijk, Mo Salah and Trent Alexander-Arnold were all to leave in the summer, but we win the title, Liverpool win the title this season, would you take it? And he was like, yep, of course, absolutely. And I just want people to know that, like, the match-going fans, it's about winning the title, because players come and players go, and Trent's a genius of a right-back, and Mo Salah's stats are Mo Salah's stats, and Virgil van Dijk's a monster and a leader. But it's about the club. And only in the blink of an eye, he was like, yeah, of course I'd take that, because that's the title. And players come and go, and that's the reality there. Just on Trent, I think something's annoyed people is the fact that Real Madrid have put in a bid this January, because Real Madrid don't put in a bid unless Trent's teams encourage them to do so. Because if you're Trent Alexander-Arnold, if you were going to go to Real Madrid, you'd say, look, I want to go to you, but please just shut up in the press. Don't say anything. Don't make an offer. I'm going to sign for you in the summer. Let me handle the narrative here, and I will, if I want, say I'm going to leave, or I'll just shut up completely or whatever. But for Real Madrid to put in a bid in January, I just think they would only have done that with the okay from Trent's team, presumably, because otherwise, why would you do that as Real Madrid? You're destabilising a player who you want to sign. So I think if Trent Alexander-Arnold wants to move to Real Madrid, I don't understand why his agent or his representatives haven't said to Real Madrid, don't put anything out, please. Shut up. Don't put in an offer, and I'm going to join you in the summer. But I think that's probably annoyed Liverpool fans more than anything. The fact that suddenly Real Madrid have put in a bid that's now been rejected. Now they're going to come back and offer 30, 40, 50 million. Because at 50 million with 6 months left in your contract, if you're Liverpool, you start to think, Jesus, that's 50 million quid for a player. Yeah. That's not bad. You've got Conor Bradley, might still win the league. Imagine if they sold Liverpool in January, which they're not going to do, but imagine if Liverpool sold Trent Alexander-Arnold in January and still won the league and got 50 million quid. Then you'd be like, that's incredible. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, the ball is very much in Trent's court rather than anybody else's. And the January transfer window leads to these opportunities where the player power can very much come into play. If he wants to go now, Liverpool should just let him go. Like, if he really wants to, then just let him go. Like, you don't want a player that doesn't want to be there for the second half of the season if you do end up in a title fight, which undoubtedly somebody's going to make a push to at least try and get onto the coattails of Liverpool at some point. There has to be. I know, mentioned kind of at the beginning of the podcast, Arsenal dropping points this weekend, and I don't see City coming back into the equation at all. But Liverpool have to have a slump at some point somewhere. It can't be all sunshine and rainbows with Arne Slot for the full length of this season. And you want people that want to be there and in that fight, rather than somebody who's got his head turned looking the other way. It's a very simple thing in football when it comes to attitude. And you can see what a bad attitude does at a club like Manchester United at the moment. So,
I think just finally on the title race, I think Liverpool will drop points second half of the season. I think, for me, Arsenal have got 18 games left, and I think to win the league, Arsenal probably have to win 16 or 17 of those 18 games. And that's a big task without your best player in Saka. And I know Arsenal fans will look at the fixture list and say they've actually got easier games because they've got a lot of the big boys at home and a lot of the just the way it's sort of balanced out the first and second half of the season. But you've got 18 games left, Arsenal, and this Arsenal side has got to go on a Man City run and win 16, 17 of those 18. Are they going to do that? Maybe. If they do, then Arteta deserves an awful lot of credit.
Dave,
yeah.
Are Southampton the worst Premier League football side we've ever seen? And are they going to get fewer points than Derby County's 11?
Yeah, and it's quite young when Derby County got 11. But I do remember it. But I just watched the Southampton side and I think it's really confused. I mean, they were obviously told to play a certain way that took them up, and there's been no change from that. And they look like a championship side.
I mean, you do when you concede 5 on a weekend. Definitely, you look like a championship side.
It's hard to get promoted, but it's impossible to stay up now. Almost, I would say that's the kind of situation that promoted sides in the championship come up with. But yeah, they're bad. They're real bad. I mean, real bad. And it's a shame because it's quite a nice football club, isn't it?
3 times since the start of December, they've conceded 5 goals in the Premier League. It's not. I mean, that is imperiously ugly. I can't. Woefully defensive. And I feel sorry for Saints fans because they were one of the best sides to watch in the Championship last season. They were really easy on the eye. That level of football and that style of football in the Championship was perfect for looking great. But you can't try and play that against the big boys. And I liked Ivan Juric in Italy. I don't think he's a bad appointment or anything like that, but I don't think that's the kind of guy to get you out of this trouble.
Unusual one, that. And I agree with you. I quite liked him when I was covering Italian football, but unusual one, that. Not quite sure, apart from money from his perspective and some kind of name, second-tier name. I mean, when you bring him in, it's like, and I know he's got a short contract, but the question is, is he the guy to get you back up in the Premier League to the Premier League from the Championship? Probably not. So, very strange one. I've also one name, Tyler Dibbling. What a footballer he is, Mr. Wilson. That's an England international. At some point in the very near future, Tyler Dibbling. Love watching him play. He's kind of like. This is a really weird analogy. Do you remember Alexander Hleb? Hleb at Arsenal.
Yeah, Hleb. Yeah.
It's like, so imagine like the best 5 minutes of Hleb's career. He's got that similar kind of gait in the way he carries the ball. That's a really unfair comparison because Hleb was like a failure, but he was sort of great.
I was going to say.
It's a really odd comparison, that, but just Arsenal fans, just remember the best sort of moments of Hleb, and that's Tyler Dibbling. Yeah, in England International, he'll go for 50 million to someone. Should we wrap up with the footy by talking about Alexander Isak transfer watch?
The price is going up. Isak coin is going up. It's like Bitcoin at the moment. Isak coin is very strong right now.
Yeah, I mean, he scored again.
Just stay where you are when you're scoring goals, though. Like, I cannot emphasize that enough. I love players want to go to the biggest, best. They want to compete for titles, etc., stuff like that. But just be patient. Do it for a season and a bit, and this time next year you'll be 150 million. Like, just you're very comfortable and you're playing lights out football.
He's not going in January, realistically. I don't think so.
No.
Newcastle in a Carabao Cup semi-final, which might not seem like the biggest game in the world, but actually it kind of is. Like that, Newcastle travel to Arsenal on Tuesday night in the Carabao Cup. That is a massive football match, Ollie, for Newcastle United. Like, it's absolutely mad. Because if they could get a draw at the Emirates, maybe Arteta rests a few, go back to St James's, second leg of a Carabao Cup semi-final, and then all of a sudden they're at Wembley, and then they can break that kind of jinx of not winning a trophy for so long. So, yeah. And actually, I saw the other day, this is something to keep an eye on. Could you make a case, Ollie, that across global sport, Newcastle are the biggest, and I hate this word, but biggest brand or franchise not to have won something for so long? In terms of regular attendance, in terms of what they are as an institution, this is something to rack our brains. Maybe we can chat about this more as Newcastle get closer to it. Okay, yeah. I knew
Dallas Cowboys
knock me down with the American sports reference that I can't compete with.
Dallas Cowboys haven't won since the mid-90s, but are still the biggest sports franchise on the planet, have sold out attendance and are considered every single year to be in the hunt for a Super Bowl. So the wait, although the time hasn't been as long, the level of expectation is so much greater on Dallas than it is on any American football team on the planet. And which I enjoy greatly as an Eagles fan. I enjoy their misery.
Let's just sorry, finally, because I wanted to talk about Tottenham and Ange Postecoglou, one of my favourite topics as we wrap up the football. Ollie, if there was this kind of ties in a bit with Ruben Amorim. If there were trophies for principles and having ideas, then Amorim and Postecoglou would have stacked cabinets. Because both of those two are just obsessed with their ideas and their, the fact that they're their principles. And it struck me as, is it an asset to have one idea, or should you actually have lots of ideas? Because having one idea, we've all got ideas out there. Everyone's got an app idea or a website they never built, or I'm going to move to Japan or do this. Having idea, you need to have multiple ideas that you actually execute successfully. So this kind of obsession with principles and ideas, when it's kind of more important to win football matches. I'm not sure that it's some kind of... I'm torn with Postecoglou. Is he this mad, stubborn Aussie genius who's totally, bedded to one overriding philosophy, and is that kind of beautiful and mad, or is it just it's just a bit weird that him and Amorim are just kind of obsessed with their principles? Oh, and the other question, is Ange Postecoglou the most masculine Premier League manager of all time? Because I heard Postecoglou's stubbornness described as toxic masculinity the other day, and obviously I hate that phrase, but I just thought that was so funny, because there's something in that. There's something in that.
Yeah, it's the dad who doesn't use the instructions because he's a bloke. So I'm gonna. I know how to put this IKEA furniture together. Yeah. I know how to do this. I did orienteering when I was younger, so I can get us across the moors. Don't worry, we got this. The stubbornness, toxic masculinity thing is a very good line to sum up Ange Postecoglou at the moment. Sticking with your idea is great when your idea is great, but if your idea continues to be the downfall as well as the quality that you have. Tottenham going forward are a really good side. They're really fun to watch. They're expansive. They are entertainment. But they're also entertainment because they concede goals, and they will not have this rationale of, let's learn how to defend a lead. Let's go with just a sprinkle of Jose. We don't have to park a bus, but let's at least put a couple of scooters in the way. You know what I mean? We don't have to go the whole hog, but let's have some defensive stability. And Postecoglou's just
he's
stubbornness,
great though, isn't he? It's funny
to not do that. It's wild. It's that definition of madness of repeating the same thing and expecting a different result, and it's just not. It's not going to be the case. Tottenham have thrown away so many points and so many leads this season because of their defensive fragility. Which, unless they go out and buy this,
they got loads injured.
Virgil van Dijks.
They got loads injured.
But that doesn't change things like your structure. You're pulled open not because of the injured players that are being replaced by guys that wouldn't normally be on a starting first 11. They still should know how to defend in the way that Postecoglou's asked them to defend. That's the best thing about good managers, is that you can fill people in and out because it's a system that works. And we've seen with or without injuries, the system doesn't work. So it's not the players, it's the system at this point with Postecoglou. And to quote every TikToker and Instagrammer or whatever, I'm kind of here for it. I really enjoy Tottenham. I've always had a bit of a soft spot for them. I enjoy watching this kind of wild car crash. Like,
I'd love it if he won a trophy, Ollie. I just think it'd be because he'd be convinced then that everyone else was an idiot and he was a genius. Like, if he goes on and wins the Carabao Cup or Europa League or FA Cup, like, he will literally go to bed being like, everyone else doesn't have a fucking clue and I am just a bloody genius. Like, how could he not think that? And he wins the final like 9-2 or something, Matt.
And you remember Jose's big deal, I won 1, 2, 3, like, Premier League titles. Can you imagine Postecoglou next seasons? I bloody ended the Trent, the silverware drought, didn't I? Anybody else got a trophy back there? No?
And he's playing 6 strikers and him being like, don't you remember last season it worked for me there?
Crikey, the Europa League trophies back there, guys.
What a man. Just on the like toxic masculinity thing. So the question of who's the most masculine Premier League manager of all time, most people would instinctively go to Sean Dyche, you know, the famous woke nonsense meme. But actually, Sean Dyche is a really defensive manager, and there's something a bit like wussy about that. Like, something a bit like, oh, we don't want to concede a goal. Whereas Ange Postecoglou is the definition of masculine, because he's just like, I don't give a fuck, bro. Like, I don't give a fuck. I'm going to just...
Defending in the Premier League is part of the liberal left woke agenda.
He's just like, take that, Starmer. I'm playing fucking 5 forwards and I don't care. Like,
Ange Postecoglou is the best man you'd ever have for a stag in your mid-20s. Because he's not holding back and things go off the rails real quick. Ange is arranging the strippers, think he could do it Class A's,
mate,
all of that kind of stuff.
How old is he? 60? Like, I reckon he's got a big stag in him. Like, you can imagine him, if Tottenham win a trophy on the trophy parade, just going absolutely bonkers.
You know, you see the rugby guys who are still in their rugby kit after winning like a Six Nations Grand Slam 4 days after, and they're seen still on the booze in a pub in like South Wales somewhere or something like that. Postecoglou is seen in a walkabout in London, still in his suit from like the Europa League final or something.
Also, I don't know whether we covered this at the time, but there was a press conference like 2 days before Christmas where presumably his wife and kids, if he's got wife and kids, they're back in Australia. So he was asked, like, how are you spending Christmas Day? Like, obviously, your family, like, you know, whatever his family is in Australia. And he was like, no, I'll be by myself. And I just think the fact that Ange Postecoglou spent Christmas Day by himself is just amazing as well, and just really masculine.
No, don't need any of this. Don't need love and support around me. I'm not Sean Dyche with my woke agenda defensive football.
Sort of did his own thing. Just watching VHS of, like, the most attacking teams of the 90s or whatever.
An important case of VB in every goal of Spain 82 on the VHS.
Madman. Right, Ollie, we talked football for a long time. Let's go through any other business and other sports, Ollie. Yeah, we got golf, we got American sport. The next, Caitlin Clark, talk to us.
All right, let's start with something you brought up, actually, which was interesting. The LeBron James surpassing Michael Jordan, 563 30-point games in NBA career. Jordan had 562 30-point or more games, obviously, in his NBA career. As somebody that's not massive into their basketball, Dave, does this mean anything to you? Do you see it as a big achievement? Do you see it... You've obviously heard, as a sports fan in general, the discussion of LeBron or Jordan. What does this do?
I'll be honest, Ollie. I was editing a press conference where he was talking about it. So rather than my natural curiosity finding this out, and I thought, I know what will impress Mr. Wilson. I'll just drop a little LeBron stat out there. So I was editing a press conference, and that's how I came. Why is it significant? Is it presumably a lot of these records have tumbled over the years because he's been in the game for 20 odd years.
Well, exactly. So this is something we spoke about the other week of LeBron passed the all-time minutes as well of, was it Wilt Chamberlain? All-time number of minutes played in the NBA in his career, right? So that he now leads minutes in NBA history. He now leads 30-point games in NBA history. I think he probably leads assists as well. So it continues the debate of, is LeBron the best basketball player we've ever seen of all time? And the debate is a pointless one because Michael Jordan is still by a mile the greatest of all time. And I just want to explain exactly why, right? So I'm going to give you some stats here. Total points. LeBron is number 1 on the list. All-time points in the NBA. Michael Jordan is 5th. All right? So LeBron's got him there. Points per game. Jordan 1, LeBron 5. Playoff points per game. Jordan 1, LeBron 6. Scoring titles, i.e. ending the season with the most points. Jordan, first of all time with the most scoring titles. LeBron, sixth. Finals MVP awards, Jordan's had more than LeBron. All-time defensive first team, Jordan, first on the list, LeBron, fifth. I mean, I can go on. Playoff points per playoff series, playoff victories with 48 or more. It's LeBron loses to Jordan in every category when you start taking averages. And it's something that I think gets really lost in general, the idea of taking the average as opposed to taking the number. You can have a guy that's like LeBron can score all the points in the world, but if you've been in the NBA for more time than anybody else and you're up there as one of the best players, shouldn't you be scoring more points than anybody else because you've had more opportunity than anybody else? Greatness comes from consistency per game, per run, per playoff series of being the best time and time again.
Is this like the Alan Shearer debate, Ollie? As in, Alan Shearer's got the most Premier League goals by miles, but if you look at like goals per game, loads are ahead of him. But he's up there. He's scored the most because he's been around the longest. He was around the longest.
Yeah, he had the longest amount of time. And you get it in American football as well. So it used to be a 15-game season, then it got expanded to 16, then it got expanded now to a 17-game season in the NFL. Saquon Barkley this week could have broken the all-time rushing record that's held by Eric Dickerson of the LA Rams. Now, back when Dickerson was playing, 15-game season. So Dickerson had like 2,100 and something yards in a 15-game season, whereas Saquon Barkley has had 17 games or 16 games this season, didn't play this week, didn't surpass the record. But Barkley this year has a better rushing average, 3.8 yards per carry, as opposed to Eric Dickerson, 3.6 that year. So Barkley could argue, had he been given the ball more times during the first 15 games of the season, he could have surpassed that record anyway. And Barkley had 2,000 yards this season. And I think there's a statement to be able to be said that Barkley's rushing yardage this year is one of the best all-time performances and perhaps better than Eric Dickerson because the average per game is better. It still won't eclipse the all-time record, but if he eclipsed the all-time record, there's an asterisk that says you had 2 more games anyway. So it just doesn't really come into the equation. Sports are evolving so much and changing with dietitians, with the way athletes have grown and developed, basically, like organic human beings to build and sculpt, let alone the pace, the physicality, the extra games that we're seeing in every single sport as everything expands. You have to start looking at averages, and averages is where it should come into it of, did you play 15 games that year and how many carries did you have in your average on that? It blows my mind that people are willing to get stuck into one statistic of an overall encompassing statistic and then say LeBron's better than Jordan because of this. And it's like, just look at averages. Kill the debate completely then.
Can you explain to me, Ollie, just moving on from this, can you explain to me why college football is so big in America? Because that, to a Brit, is or I guess to people in most countries. Yeah, it's like, how can that be as big? And it is huge, right? Like, massive. Attendances, like eyeballs, it's massive. Well, why is it so big in America?
Because you've only got 32 teams in the NFL, whereas colleges, there are so many colleges scattered around the US, you can have such a greater affinity to college because it's close to you. You can go and see the games.
As opposed to football, by the way, in England, that obviously goes down the pyramid a million times. So little pockets of geographical, you get where I'm going.
And if you went to that school as well, these schools are huge. So if you went to that school and you spent every Saturday going to watch that team, you feel an affinity. They have a great pride for their colleges in general. If you go to that college, like, it just becomes almost indoctrinated into you, which is either a good or a bad thing. So college football has a larger reach across the US in general than the NFL does. And that's why, although the money's there in the NFL and the TV ratings, attendances at college football are so high, and they have the biggest stadiums in the country. Michigan can have 110,000, and they sell that out pretty much every single week.
Say that again, because that is absolutely bonkers.
For 110,000 seater stadium. Yeah.
What could you even see in that? Have you ever been to a college football game?
I've been to a low-level one. I've not been to any of the big, like, southern states, like Bama, Georgia, or anyone like that. But I went to see Virginia Cavaliers against local university, Richmond, in their, like, season opener, where they always play, like, a bit of a naff team, just to get a win under the belt, get some kind of confidence going through the team. And it's great. It's awesome. It's so unique because you have the marching band. Oh, actually, what am I talking about? I went to see UCLA against USC as well a couple of years ago at the Rose Bowl, which was unbelievable. You have the marching band. There is that school spirit because they're all like, all the players and so many people going to the game are youngsters, part of that school community, right? So they've got that wonderful teenage naivety. Oh my God, I love my school. Isn't everything great? I don't have to think about anything in the world. I'm just going to classes and life is good. And so you get that school pride and cheesy American kind of high school musical style pep, along with then the serious business of the sporting event taking place out in front of you. And it's serious business because college football coaches get paid as much as NFL coaches.
Yeah.
$4 million a year, stuff like that. Like,
imagine
crazy.
like the coach of like Manchester University football team. I mean, it's just. I mean, I know we're broke compared to the Americans, but yeah. I mean, the person that trains the University of Manchester men's 11 football team. First of all, it's probably done on a volunteer basis. Or if they get paid anything, it'll be. Yeah, I mean, it's not $4 million a year.
It'll be a student. A lot of the time, the coaches at universities are
like captain
students.
Also coaches them. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. The other thing is that American football started in college. Like there wasn't a national league. It was all born out of the college system first. So the roots of the sport come from college as well, which is another big reason. But they've ruined college football this year because they've taken a very brief rundown of what it used to be. College football used to be teams play each other across the country. You have your conferences where you have to play like 5 home, 5 away games between your conference, and then you can pick other schools to play, etc. And then at the end of the year, a load of journalists and professionals within the sport would sit down and go, those two were the best 2 teams that we saw this year. They should play for a national championship. And it was done on like a kind of ambiguity, those 2 were the best. Then they changed it a few years ago and said, right, what we're going to do is we're going to have a playoff. So we're going to pick the top 4 teams, and those will go into semi-finals and then a final. And everyone was like, well, you're kind of losing the nature of it, because the great thing was that in college football, the season mattered loads. The regular season mattered. And who you chose to play outside of your conference mattered. So you could be, say you're Alabama, right? You know you're going to play 10 tough games in your conference, but then you might also be like, we're going to show that we're the best team, so we're going to play from Northern California and the kind of division that used to be over there called the Pac-12. We're going to play USC, or we're going to play Oregon even further up there, because they're a big team this year as well, and we want to show that we're the best in the regular season. And there was always a debate around who the top 2 were. So by expanding it to a top 4, there was like, okay, well, if you were maybe in that debate to be in the top 2, you've still got a chance to win a national championship. And everyone was like, okay, this takes away a bit of the love of the regular season. It becomes more about now the playoff run, but fine. And then college football saw, well, the playoffs make loads of money because it's the playoffs, and Americans love a playoff and love negating any work in a regular season. And so they expanded it this year to a 12-team playoff, which now means, like, if you were having a discussion of the top 2 teams in the Premier League this year, Dave, you could go Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea could get a look in, but you'd never go, well, Spurs down in 12th might be the best team as well. So they shouldn't be anywhere near a top 2 discussion. And what you've got this year is the top 4 teams lost in the playoffs to kick things off in the college football playoff. So you don't have anybody above like the 5th best side in college football in the semi-finals of their playoffs now. So you've got like 5, 7, 8, and 6 are your semi-finalists.
When you're obviously going to finish in the playoffs, don't sides just take their foot off the gas completely?
Well, it's difficult because you shouldn't, because there's still the level of ambiguity and your strength of schedule. You cannot afford to lose more than, it used to be you couldn't afford to lose more than 1 game to be in the college football playoff. It had to be a no loss or 1 loss season. Now 3 of the 4 teams remaining have lost 2 games this year, which is unthinkable to think they'd be anywhere near a national championship debate if you lost 2 games in the season, because there are teams that went undefeated. There are teams that lost 1 game who are much better. So you can't afford to take your foot off the gas too much, because the college football permutations of being considered a good team, basically you can't afford to lose more than 2 games. resting starters and things like that just isn't going to work for the regular season. But the point is now is that because you have a 12-team playoff, the regular season, it's a bit like Major League Soccer, they have playoffs. So the regular season doesn't matter. It's just about getting into the playoffs and then turning it on for each individual game. But the beautiful thing about college football was that the regular season mattered so much and you couldn't afford to slip up more than once. Now you can, and it ruins, a 15-week season, basically, for me. It's just a bit of a shame that it's going money more than anything else. As I say, you wouldn't have a debate that Tottenham are in a top 4 category in the Premier League right now, but now we're allowing that to happen in college football, which is just a shame. And it's a bit of a negative note as the Victor Meldrew comparisons continue.
It's been quite a positive pod so far, so we're really bouncing in the first pod of 2025, I reckon.
Bring the level down a little bit.
Yeah. What about the next Caitlin Clark, Ollie? You sent this to me this week. For those who don't know, Caitlin Clark, basically the biggest star in women's NBA.
Yeah, without a doubt. Arguably the biggest female athlete in the US.
Ooh. In the world, maybe.
Possibly. Definitely in the US. I mean, she was named Time Magazine Female Athlete of the Year, which I think is... Time Magazine Athlete of the Year.
Right.
Which obviously brought up that crazy discussion of shouldn't the whole of the WNBA consider it and all that kind of thing. But Elona Mayar, the USA Olympic Sevens superstar, who became one of the most followed athletes on TikTok and Instagram because of her videos that she was making during the Olympics, recently signed in the last few weeks for Bristol Bears, women's rugby team here in the UK. Now, Mayar's one of the biggest followed female athletes on the planet. She does it's not thought stuff. It's not like getting her tits out or anything like that. She does fun, jokey stuff, takes people into the world behind sports, etc. And she made her first appearance for Bristol Bears this week. I think it was something like 8,000 people came out for a women's rugby game, which is kind of unheard of. And the reason they came out is because of her. And this is, again, something where the WNBA have fallen apart with Caitlin Clark slightly because they've created this kind of negative narrative around Caitlin Clark. There's a lot of bitchiness and it's not about Caitlin Clark, it's about all of us. She's not the reason. It's well, she kind of is the reason. You have to accept that and just use her by throwing her into the limelight to generate the audience that you want to get. A women's rugby in this country should use Elona Mayar as that exact thing. Target all of the attention on her so you get the trickle-down attention on the sport so you can raise the profile, which will boost coaching, facilities, make the sport so much better. We've seen it, that pattern with women's football in this country, of once you draw the attention in, that's where the money comes in, which improves the coaching, which improves the quality, which makes it more watchable, which then brings TV audiences, which brings TV rights money, etc. And it continues to build and build and build. And it's a slow period of time that it will take to get to that, but you have to use that. And I think Elona Mayar could become, because she's come to the UK, but still will have that US audience as well. Rugby's a bit of a niche sport in some countries, but I think as a female superstar athlete, there is a chance for her to go into that next level spectrum because you'll get the US audience still keeping an eye on her. She's without a doubt going to be in the running for sports personality of the year next year because she has a personality that she's putting out and showing out there on the field and in social media. It's a big moment, I think, this for women's rugby in this country.
Very interesting. Something to keep an eye out on. Any other business, Mr. Wilson? What else has been going on in the world of sport? I feel like we covered most of the...
One last thing is last night, Hideki Matsuyama put in one of the all-time performances on the PGA Tour, logging a 34 under par through 4 rounds of golf.
So the course is too easy.
Sorry, 35 under par. Yeah, at Century in the Century course in Maui, the season opener for the PGA Tour. And I think you hit the nail on the head there, Dave, because I was having a look at the greatest rounds of golf in PGA Tour history. Cameron Smith was 34 under par through 4 rounds of golf at the Century event. John Rahm was 33 under par through 4 rounds of golf at the Century event in 2002. Matt Jones, 32 under par at 2002 Century event. Ernie Els, 2003, 31 under par at the Century event. It's impressive that Matsuyama has still eclipsed that. 35 under par is insane. It's an insane number to do. They had very good conditions this week. Apparently, it was the softest wind they've ever seen in the islands while during this event, particularly for a early January start. Just not a breath of air around the place. It's a very up and downhill course, and the downhill they can drive it like 400 yards. But does the ease of this diminish the achievement if you know that the Century course, the Century event, the course in Hawaii allows that level of scoring anyway?
Is this like when the fella went under 2 hours in broke the 2 hour marathon record? It was like some Nike-sponsored event, but he did it with like under perfect conditions at the optimal temperature, with the team around him, with the gradient and the atmosphere and the humidity and the oxygen, all this kind of stuff. It's sort of similar vein. I want to end this pod, Ollie, by asking you, what's your best ever day on a golf course? First of all, what's your best ever day in terms of the memory you've had? But more importantly to me, actually, what's the best ever? What's your best ever? What's the best you've ever shot on a golf course? First of all, let's give the listeners some idea of how good you are.
I did it the other day. Actually, I equaled my best ever score of breaking 80. I hit 79 at my golf club. I did it back in March at the start of last year, and I did it with my first round in January this year. So I was 8 over par. Which
solo, or were you with anyone?
I was with people as well. So it was, both attempts have been seen and verified by people. And I went 2 over par on the back 9, which is like ridiculously good for me. That is really, really good. So that's my best ever
Sorry to
round.
hijack this very quickly, Ollie. If, let's say, money was taken care of completely and you didn't have to work, so you just did whatever you wanted to do in sports broadcasting, would you try and become... Like, well, how seriously would you take your golf? Like, if time and money wasn't an issue, how seriously would you take it? And is there any part of your ego that thinks you could become like semi-pro? No,
not a chance. Not a chance. I mean, there are guys that play off +4, which is where you add 4 shots onto the start of your round that aren't on pro tours or anything like that. Like, becoming a professional golfer is a insanely tough thing to do, let alone semi-professional. Like, it'd be very cool to get to scratch. But getting to scratch is very, very difficult. Single figures would be the one that I'm aiming for. That's my aim for 2025, get the handicap down to single figures.
Haven't actually heard you talk much golf recently. Has the January weather been ensuring that you're not on the golf course much?
Out of season, the FedEx.
Yeah, but
FedEx is over.
Oh, look, there's a little rare sighting of the Wilson dog behind him. For those on YouTube, can we see the dog diet watch? Because last time we saw your dog on YouTube, Ollie, I made a rather mean comment. Say again.
She's had a lot over Christmas and New Year, I tell you.
Christmas bowl.
She's just like the rest of us. Yeah, just like the rest of us.
And I do feel like now we will have more watchers on YouTube after I kind of referenced it, Ollie. Our Amorim chat from last week went, well, I mean, I'm not going to say we're bigger than Mr. Beast, but, 2,500 views.
That's Mrs. Beast back there.
Yeah,
Mrs. Beast,
lovely,
just there,
lovely,
little beastie. No, I've been playing loads of golf, Dave, unfortunately. I've been playing way too much in between the busy Christmas period. I'm amazed how much I've been able to get in. I actually shot a potential 79, but we'll never know because I wasn't tallying the score the other day as well at a new course. But things are looking good for Wilson's golf in 2025, which means it's all going to capitulate in about 2 weeks' time because that's what happens. If you get good, you play crap, and then you go through a bad time and it gets better again. But yeah,
that's life.
It's the winter grind, Dave. You've got to have something to give you purpose and work towards, right?
Yeah. This country is fucking depressing in January.